Hey folks, wanted to spend a moment talking to you about the different types of laws that exist in this country, right? We've been talking about the judicial branch and some of the processes that are involved with that, but we've got some different types of laws that will land you in different types of courts, for instance, and so thought it might be valuable just to take a second and to look. I got some videos in here that I have added to the playlist that is on YouTube. So if you're watching this one at home, you may want to check those out in person. We will let you see those videos as we go through. Our first type of law is what's called substantive law. It's law whose content or substance defines what we can or can't do. This is the one that you're going to have the most common experience with during the course of your day. I put some examples up here for you. Probably the biggest one is speeding. Right? There are laws that say what the speed limit is as you're coming through town, as you're on country roads, as you're on the interstate, however you're driving places. That is an example of that type of law. Obviously, you've got more serious ones, the idea of murder, robbery, or assault, but it goes all the way down to littering. So anything that the city council, the town council, the state of Indiana or the federal government would make defining what you can or can't do is under this category of substantive law. And so that's, like I said, that's going to be the one we have the most experience with. The second type of law is procedural law. These are laws that establish how laws are applied or enforced. And so got some examples for you there as well. If you remember when we were talking about some of the protections from the Bill of Rights, about protections for people accused of crimes. Some of these laws are going to flow from that. So laws about witness testimony, how trials are set up, how evidence can be collected and then introduced, all fit under the idea of procedural law. So it's the idea of how things are supposed to happen in the legal system. Fits under this idea of procedural law. Criminal law, right? Violations of this are what we call, crimes, but they are laws that prohibit behavior that is harmful to society. So there are reasons that we do these things, and so if you commit basically an act that is harmful to society, you've committed a crime. Now, there are different levels of this, right? Murder is obviously a crime. It's the most serious crime that we have out there is premeditated murder, and so that carries a certain penalty with it. That's going to be different than, say, the penalty of stealing an apple, right? That would be an example of theft, but obviously we don't want to give people the same penalty for stealing an apple that we would somebody that has killed another human being, for instance. But anything we do that's considered to be harmful to society. So if you were, it could be something like driving really fast, right? If it's reckless endangerment or something like that, that could be considered a crime. DUI, those sorts of things would fit into this. Criminal law, a lot of times you'll see this with kind of the guys on television, right? If you've been accused of a crime, call this guy and he'll help you, or this gal and she'll help you try and navigate the legal system. This is probably what we're most familiar with, though. This shows up more in the paper in trials and things like that. We see criminal law. Civil law is law that regulates interactions between individuals. So if you violate civil law, it's called a tort. And so there are connections between civil law, though, and criminal law. So let's say that you murder someone, right? There is a penalty that goes along for that if you're convicted. Probably the most famous example of this is O.J. Simpson. There was a trial when I was a kid where he's accused of killing his wife and her boyfriend, and he was put on trial for those crimes. He was actually found innocent of those crimes, and so he didn't go to jail for that. But her family took him to civil court, and when they took him to civil court, they sued him for the money she would have made over the course of her life, basically. And he ended up having to pay millions of dollars because in civil court, even though they can't send you to jail, you don't have to have a unanimous jury come back in civil court. And so they found him responsible for her death in civil court, and it turned out to be a huge fine that he ended up paying. So you could, somebody dies, you could sue for lost income for somebody that was killed in an accident, right? You see this a lot of times with like the Hammer and those guys down in Louisville who are wanting, if you've been injured in an accident, right, to sue. What they're suing based on is, what you would have done or what you could have made going forward, and then what you couldn't because of the accident that happened. You could also sue for the value of stolen items. So even if the person is not convicted of theft, or if they are, you can sue, said the person stole the apple, you could sue them for the price of the apple. Probably wouldn't make a whole lot of financial sense to do that in time, but, do what you want to do, I guess. There are also what we call constitutional law, and this is law that's in the Constitution, and we know from reading that document every night before we go to bed, or from the decisions that the Supreme Court makes. And so there's some examples. The Voting Rights Act is one that protects the right to vote that is promised in the Constitution. Civil Rights Act protects our 14th Amendment rights to not being discriminated against. And I've got a court case, and I'm going to put this video up on the playlist, like I said, U.S. versus Eichmann, which talks about freedom of speech and flag burning, which I remember when I was in elementary and middle school was a fairly big issue in the United States. So those are the different types of laws. So as you're looking at the court cases that we're going to be doing, as you look at any kind of law that you're seeing, maybe think to yourself, where does this fit in to what category does this fit in as far as a law goes? Like I said, head over to the YouTube playlist, and there are some cool videos there to help you differentiate between the different types of laws.